What if I told you that Bob Iger's grand vision for Disney is unraveling far quicker than anyone is willing to admit? The media has been celebrating Moana 2's box office performance, but the reality, it's a different story. What was once hailed as a hit is quickly spiraling into a massive failure, one that could cost Disney dearly. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why this could be the final nail in the coffin for Iger's reign at the House of Mouse. Stick around because the truth might just shock you. Now let's dive into why Bob Iger, CEO of the Walt Disney Company, is under increasing scrutiny as 2025 approaches, the year that could make or break his leadership. It all centers around Moana 2. Despite the media's attempt to paint it as a hit, the truth behind the scenes tells a much darker story. What once seemed like a box office triumph is quickly becoming a financial liability, and this could trigger a chain reaction that leads to a disastrous year for Disney. Now, if you're wondering how this could possibly be true, let's dive into what's really going on. Welcome to the channel where we always bring you the unvarnished truth, no sugarcoating, and definitely no media spin. Today, we're about to expose the narrative that's been carefully constructed by the media and shatter it. Mainstream outlets, including Forbes, have been publishing puff pieces attempting to defend Iger as he heads toward his final years at Disney. He's scheduled to step down in 2026, and 2025 was supposed to mark the grand finale of his tenure. But instead of focusing on his leadership, these articles are resorting to odd arguments like claiming his physical fitness somehow makes him a better CEO. Let's be honest, Bob Iger was once seen as an untouchable CEO, a figure everyone admired, but over the past few years, his leadership has taken a dramatic turn. As he increasingly inserted politics into Disney's agenda, pushing the company in a partisan direction, Iger alienated a large portion of Disney's traditional family-oriented audience. These actions have had a lasting impact, driving away many longtime supporters who once viewed Disney as a wholesome brand, and now this shift in direction is starting to backfire. Articles like the one from Forbes try to paint Iger in a glowing light, but the truth is that his actions, particularly his ideological moves, have placed Disney in a precarious position. The company is struggling, and it's becoming increasingly clear that 2025, instead of being a year of celebration, could mark the beginning of the end for Bob Iger's legacy at Disney. The idea that Bob Iger is a great CEO simply because he's skinny is ridiculous, and frankly, it's a laughable point. If that were the case, someone like Ariana Grande would be the top contender for CEO positions across every major company. But we're not here to judge leadership based on appearance. What truly matters is the performance of the company and the results of its projects. And when it comes to Moana 2, Bob Iger's decisions are quickly coming back to haunt him. You've likely heard that Moana 2 is a massive success, but when we take a closer look, the reality isn't as bright as the media would have you believe. As of its third weekend in theaters, the worldwide box office stands at $610 million. At first glance, that might seem impressive. But let's break this down because this movie came from a completely different origin. Moana 2 wasn't originally intended for theaters. It started as a Disney show that was hastily reworked into a movie in just 6 months. And while Disney has been touting this as a success, it's not exactly a win when you consider the costs involved. To give you some perspective, let's assume the movie had a production and marketing budget totaling around $400 million. Here's the math with marketing expenses around $200 million and production costs probably exceeding $150 million. This film has a massive financial uphill battle. After taxes and theater cuts, the film needs to gross around $800 million just to break even. And that's assuming everything goes perfectly. Despite Disney's best efforts to spin this as a success, the truth is far harsher. Moana 2 has faced heavy criticism. Personally, I'd rate it a 4 out of 10, just barely passing, with the only redeeming quality being its visuals. The animation is gorgeous, the scenery breathtaking, and the voice performances from Dwayne Johnson and Cravalho are solid. But at the heart of it all, the story just falls flat. Bob Iger's decision to turn a Disney show into a theatrical release feels like a misstep, and Moana 2 is beginning to look like a prime example of that. Instead of building on the success of the original Moana, Iger tried to cash in on nostalgia with what feels more like a direct-to-DVD sequel. This could very well be Disney's return to Neverland moment, a sequel that's far inferior to the original, making audiences second-guess their decision to show up in theaters. When a company relies on the goodwill of a beloved brand to drive viewership, but the product fails to meet expectations, the result is a serious hit to the company's reputation, and in this case, that's exactly what's happening. As the film flounders at the box office, Bob Iger's position at Disney becomes more precarious. His handling of Moana 2 may very well be the straw that breaks the camel's back, setting the stage for a very difficult year ahead. Let's break down the numbers for Moana 2 and see how the reality stacks up against the optimistic projections. In its first 6 days, the movie earned an impressive $225 million domestically. This was largely driven by the strength of the original Moana, a movie that's deeply loved by audiences. The nostalgia and goodwill attached to the first film carried Moana 2 through its initial release, making those first few days a huge success. But what happened after the initial buzz wore off? Once word got out that Moana 2 wasn't the hit people were hoping for, the momentum quickly slowed. In the next 11 days, the film only added about $80 million to its total. To put that into perspective, it made $225 million in just 6 days, and then over nearly twice the amount of time, it barely made another $80 million. That's a clear sign of a major plateau in interest. This kind of drop-off is typical for films that fail to live up to their initial hype. Now, looking ahead, it's expected that Moana 2 will continue to see diminishing returns. The second weekend saw a slight increase, but it's unlikely that the film will maintain that momentum. With competitors like Sonic 3 and Mufasa on the horizon, Moana 2 faces a tough battle to keep up, and the billion-dollar mark, that's no longer in the cards. The film is unlikely to break even close to that milestone. Why does this matter? Because it completely shatters the narrative that Bob Iger is some kind of genius, a CEO who can do no wrong. For years, the media has painted Iger as a visionary, a leader with the Midas touch. But the performance of Moana 2 raises serious questions about his current leadership and decision-making. Remember, Bob Chapek, Iger's predecessor, was criticized relentlessly, even though he greenlit the Deadpool and Wolverine crossover. Yet Iger's Moana 2, a project that was supposed to represent Disney's big comeback, is now failing to deliver on its promise. The media continues to push the narrative that Moana 2 is key to Disney's recovery, citing its success as proof that Iger is still the man for the job. But if you compare this to other films like Inside Out 2, it becomes clear that Moana 2 is nowhere near the same league. Inside Out 2 had far more staying power, and its success was not built solely on the back of nostalgia. But despite all of this, the PR machine is doing its best to paint Moana 2 as a massive win, which simply isn't the case. In the end, this situation exposes the truth behind the glossy media coverage and presents a much less flattering picture of Bob Iger's leadership at Disney. The film might have been marketed as a success, but the numbers don't lie, and as the year progresses, it's clear that Bob Iger is going to have a much harder time defending his position in 2025. Let's break down the situation with Moana 2 and Disney's handling of what should have been their crown jewel. The original Moana was already a massive hit, especially on Disney, where it became the most streamed movie of 2023, even though it was released in 2010. That's no small achievement. Moana's continued success on streaming proves just how deeply the original resonated with audiences, all without Disney lifting a finger in promotion. The movie just resonated with audiences organically, proving it was a powerful brand that could stand the test of time. However, Moana 2 should have been Disney's golden opportunity to build on that success, yet Bob Iger's decision to turn it into a rushed and lackluster theatrical release has tarnished that potential. Instead of crafting a sequel that would naturally build upon the goodwill of the first movie, Disney chose to rush out a film that feels more like a cheap direct-to-DVD sequel than a full-fledged theatrical event. This rushed production didn't do justice to Moana's legacy, and now Disney is facing a serious uphill battle. While Moana 2 managed to make a solid $225 million in its first 6 days, the fact that it's now struggling to gain traction in subsequent weeks tells a much different story. The movie is facing a steep decline in momentum, and experts predict that it will be lucky to reach $750 million globally, which isn't the massive win Disney was hoping for. In fact, based on the massive investment that went into producing and marketing the movie, it likely needs to hit $800 million to break even. Anything less would be a financial disappointment, and Disney will have a hard time justifying the investment when the return is so lackluster. This misstep could have serious repercussions for Bob Iger in 2025. He's already facing criticism for turning Moana into something far less than what it could have been, and this poor performance will only fuel doubts about his leadership. Disney's biggest brand, which had the potential to generate massive, ongoing revenue, was mishandled in favor of chasing a quick headline. Instead of nurturing it over time, Iger took a shortcut, trying to cash in on nostalgia with a film that ultimately failed to meet expectations. And yet, the media continues to praise the film's success. Screen Rant recently declared that Moana 2 was a huge box office win and that its momentum would continue. But as we can see, that momentum has already slowed, and the film's long-term performance is in jeopardy. The narrative pushed by mainstream outlets ignores the reality that this movie is unlikely to even break even, much less surpass expectations. In the end, the situation with Moana 2 reveals a much larger problem for Disney. Bob Iger's leadership is being defined by poor decisions that squander opportunities to maximize their most valuable assets. Moana could have been a billion-dollar franchise, but instead it's being dragged down by an underwhelming sequel. The consequences of these decisions will be felt for years to come, and 2025 could very well be the year when Bob Iger faces his toughest challenges yet. The article's predictions for Moana 2 are already looking wildly off the mark. Initially, Screen Rant painted a rosy picture of the movie's potential, suggesting that it would break box office records and possibly surpass even the likes of Frozen 2. They projected figures in the range of $1.20 to $1.4 billion based on the momentum Moana 2 initially showed, but reality set in quickly. The movie has plateaued far earlier than anticipated. Now it's struggling to even reach the $750 million mark, signaling a possible flop. This financial misstep can largely be attributed to Bob Iger's mismanagement of the property. What should have been a carefully planned and executed sequel turned into a rushed production cobbled together from a planned Disney Plus series. The decision to cut down episodes, slap them together into a movie, and release it theatrically has backfired. What was expected to be a massive win for Disney is now a financial disappointment, and no amount of optimistic predictions can change that. Now, looking ahead to 2025, Disney faces an even more daunting future. Iger's leadership is already being tested, and the slate of films they have planned may very well dictate whether he survives this pivotal moment. With titles like Captain America: Brave New World, Snow White with Rachel Zegler, and Fantastic Four, there's potential for hits. But the lineup also includes a lot of uncertainty. Films like Elio, Lilo, Stitch, and Predator may not live up to expectations. If the quality isn't there, 2025 could be a disaster for Disney, both creatively and financially. And that's where Bob Iger's promises of fixing Disney's creative direction are going to face their toughest test. When he returned to the CEO position, he vowed to restore creativity to Disney, a task he claimed Bob Chapek had failed at. However, 2025 will be the moment when Iger can no longer blame Chapek for poor decisions. The slate of films planned for 2025, including Deadpool and Wolverine, which were Chapek's brainchildren, are already in the pipeline. If these films don't deliver, it will fall squarely on Iger's shoulders. Disney is now at a crossroads, and whether Iger can navigate these upcoming challenges remains to be seen. With so many films slated for release and such high expectations, 2025 could mark the beginning of a spectacular downfall, or it could be the year Disney manages to turn it all around. The stakes are higher than ever, and the pressure on Iger is mounting. The situation at Disney is now circling back to the Bob Iger era, where the projects rolling out were conceived and greenlit under his leadership, but the reality check is coming hard and fast. Investors are likely in for a wake-up call as Disney faces challenges that haven't been seen in quite some time. It's becoming increasingly clear that the studio will have a difficult time finding box office success, especially with the type of content they're pushing forward. While their theme parks and cruise lines may still hold strong, it's evident that the broader entertainment side is in trouble. The recent media narrative around Bob Iger, particularly the praise he's receiving for his health and fitness, feels like a distraction. There's no denying that his leadership is being scrutinized more than ever, and no amount of PR fluff will change the fact that Disney is struggling. The question on everyone's mind is whether Iger can lead the company through its current troubles and somehow skate by unscathed, or whether the consequences of poor decision-making will catch up with him in his final years as CEO. The backlash from consumers, particularly around Moana 2, is showing that audiences aren't as easily swayed by brand loyalty as the company might have hoped. The idea that they could churn out a quick, half-hearted sequel and expect it to be a massive success has been proven wrong. Viewers are no longer content with subpar content, regardless of how much they love the first installment. They're demanding quality, and Disney is falling short. It's clear that consumers are holding Disney accountable, and their wallets are speaking louder than any corporate narrative. The future of Disney, especially in 2025, is looking increasingly uncertain, and investors should be wary. Whether Iger can turn things around or if Disney's decline will continue remains to be seen. For now, the public is proving that they won't just settle for anything less than what they expect from a brand that once ruled the entertainment world. What do you think? Will Bob Iger manage to save Disney from its current struggles, or is this the beginning of a bigger downfall? Is Moana 2 just a taste of what's to come, or can Disney still turn things around? We want to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below.